There are 10,000 ways to die in the 41st millennium, but only one way to live long enough to regret it. I awoke beneath a sky of fire. No stars, just burning clouds swirling over a blasted wasteland. My last memory was of a sealing ritual gone wrong, an explosion of chakra, and then silence. When I drew breath again, the air burned my lungs. My chakra felt distant, broken, as if the universe itself rejected it. But something else replaced it, a hum in the void, deeper than any jutsu, older than the gods of my home world. They call it the warp here. I didn't know that yet, but I felt it. A storm of whispers clawing at the edges of my thoughts. I stumbled across a battlefield littered with corpses clad in strange armor, Astartes, though I wouldn't learn the name for many moons. Their blood steamed, their helmets cracked open like shells. Towering metal beasts smoldered in the distance, the banners of the Imperium of Man torn and blackened. I thought I was in hell. Maybe I was. If you crave more tales from the dark millennium, I muttered into the burning wind. Smash that subscribe button. The Emperor protects those who support the channel. That was before I knew his name was forbidden where I was headed. I scavenged for water, food, anything. My old instincts as a shinobi kicked in. I rationed, I tracked, I hid from aerial machines that shrieked like angry hawks. But without chakra, I was a soldier without a weapon. My body still remembered the movements of the shadow clone technique, but when I tried to form the seals, only sparks of black light flared from my fingertips. That was the first sign. The second came, days later, when I found the Imperial outpost. Its walls were broken, its fox towers silent. Dozens of guardsmen lay dead, their lasguns clutched in cold fingers. One of them still breathed, a young trooper whose eyes were clouded with fear and disbelief. I knelt beside him, offered water. He saw my eyes, the fox-slit pupils, a remnant of my past, and screamed, "Witch! Warp-tainted! Stay back!" His trembling hand fired, but the lasbolt curved, literally curved, and struck his comrade instead. My instincts screamed danger, and before I could react, my anger flared. The energy I'd been suppressing erupted. The world twisted. The sand beneath us melted into glass. The wounded soldier's screams turned into echoes that didn't stop when his lungs did. And above me, for a moment, the clouds parted, not to reveal a sun, but an eye, vast and crimson, watching. When I came to, the outpost was silent. Everything had turned to ash. I hadn't meant to kill them, but some power, wild, infinite, had answered my will. I began to wander again, trying to understand. I listened to the whispers now instead of resisting them. They spoke of power, of survival, of purpose. They told me my world had been a lie, that gods of chaos and change ruled all existence, and that I was destined to serve one of them. At night, my dreams were filled with sigils burning in blue fire, the same color as my old Rasengan. I drew them in the dirt when I woke, just to remember. That was when the first of the cultists found me. They wore robes of flayed skin, chanting praises to Tzeentch, the changer of ways. They called me the lost son of flame. They bowed when I spoke. They said I was chosen. For the first time in this cursed galaxy, I felt something close to home. People who believed in me. But belief in the warp is never free. When I asked them what it meant to serve their god, they showed me. They carved runes into their flesh and called it devotion. They spoke of prophecy and mutation as gifts. And when one of them tried to test my loyalty, to bleed me for his ritual, I killed him without thinking. The others didn't mourn him, they cheered. That night, as his blood cooled in the dust, I stared at my hands. The black sparks danced between my fingers again, eager, alive. I whispered to the unseen presence that haunted me, "If power is what it takes to survive this world, then show me." And the warp whispered back, "We already are." The next day, I followed the cult into the wastes. Somewhere beyond the horizon, they said lay a ruined temple, a place where the veil was thin. They called it the Shrine of Thousand Eyes. I didn't know it yet, but that temple would mark the end of Naruto Uzumaki and the birth of something far worse. The Shrine of Thousand Eyes wasn't a temple. It was a wound in reality. A canyon split the land open like a corpse under a surgeon's knife. Black stone melted into twisting pillars of flesh and bone, and the air shimmered as though it couldn't decide whether it wanted to exist. The cultists around me chanted without pause, their voices cracking from thirst, but never faltering. I'd seen devotion before, comrades who would die for their village. This was different. This was hunger, pretending to be faith. They said the God of change would reveal himself to me here. At first, I thought it was a lie, until the ground pulsed. The canyon walls rippled, and thousands of eyes blinked open across the stone, each one reflecting a different world, a different me. In one, I was still a Hokage. In another, I burned in chains of gold beneath an eagle banner. The whispers returned, louder now. "You could have saved them all, if you'd only accepted our gift sooner." I staggered back, clutching my head. The voices spoke in dozens of tongues, yet I understood them all. Each word dripped with power. They promised understanding, mastery, to turn my broken chakra into something stronger. They promised a way to fight again. And I wanted to believe them. The cult's leader, a man named Sarn, stepped forward. His face was hidden behind a mask made from what looked like a flayed servo skull, the eye sockets glowing with blue fire. He carried a staff topped with a crystal that pulsed to the same rhythm as my heartbeat. "The warp calls you, stranger. You are no longer bound by the laws of the false emperor's realm, nor your dead world's balance. Speak your true name, and be remade." I hesitated. The fox within me stirred, the nine tails, my eternal burden. Its voice echoed faintly in my mind. "Fool, this is not power. This is consumption." I ignored it. I'd spent years saving others, fighting gods, bearing the weight of expectations. Here in this cursed galaxy, there was no one to save, only survival. And survival demanded strength. I stepped forward and spoke my name. The world exploded. Reality bent like molten glass. My body lifted from the ground, suspended in the warp's embrace. The runes carved into the canyon walls ignited, and a torrent of energy, not chakra, but raw psychic flame, surged into me. Pain, agony beyond description. My skin blistered and reformed. My chakra pathways twisted into something new, something unstable. When I screamed, the sound became a shockwave, hurling the cultists to their knees. When it ended, I fell to the ground, gasping. The fox was silent. My vision shimmered. The world had changed color. Every living being burned with an aura I could see and feel. My hands trembled with power. When I reached out instinctively, a floating skull nearby imploded in a burst of blue fire. Sarn knelt. Behold, the birth of a sorcerer of change. I was no longer a shinobi. I was a Pysaker, a conduit of the warp itself. That night, under the bleeding sky, I tested my new strength. I could conjure illusions that warped the senses, fire that devoured flesh and spirit, lightning that screamed like tortured souls. It wasn't chakra. It was alive, like wielding the will of a god. But the power came with a cost. Each time I reached into the warp, I felt something staring back at me. Something counting every thought. The eye I'd seen before now appeared behind my eyelids when I tried to sleep. It whispered strategies, truths about the galaxy, and lies so elegant I almost believed them. The cultists called me Lord Uzumaki now. They followed me as we raided imperial ruins, stealing tomes and relics. In one vault, I found a tattered book bound in human skin, a grimoire written by an ancient thousand-sun sorcerer. Inside more words that bent my mind to read. One phrase seared itself into my memory. Flesh is transient. Thought is eternal. I began to understand what Tzeentch offered. Not just strength, evolution. The warp could refine me, perfect me, make me something more than mortal. Still, part of me resisted. I remembered my old world, the faces of my friends, my promises. I told myself I'd use this power to find a way home, to rebuild what I'd lost. But the warp doesn't grant power for noble reasons. It grants power to see how long it takes before you stop pretending. One night, a storm came, not of rain, but of screaming light. The warp bled into real space, twisting the landscape into shapes that should not be. The cultists rejoiced, spreading their arms. I alone stood firm, my body instinctively pushing the madness back. That's when I realized the warp feared me as much as I feared it. I reached into the storm, drew the chaos into my palm, and shaped it. The energy obeyed. My hand blazed with a sphere of burning blue, a Rasengan reborn as a warp storm. And as I released it, the storm collapsed. The cultists fell to their knees in awe. Sarn whispered, "You are his chosen, the Changer's mortal flame." I didn't know then whether to feel pride or terror. Somewhere in the darkness, the warp laughed.
The birth of the sorcerer. When the warp storm finally subsided, the world was different. Or maybe I was. The sky hung like torn parchment, and the air shimmered with residual energy. The cultists murmured prayers to the Changer of Ways, but I barely heard them. I could still feel the energy of the warp storm coursing through my veins, reshaping every cell of my body. My chakra was gone, fully devoured and reconstituted into psychic power. My mind was open, too open. I saw everything. The battlefield stretched endlessly before me. Dead cities, rusting titans, rivers of oil and blood, and far beyond, the faint glimmer of distant ships burning in orbit. Every thought, every intention, every secret pulse of life resonated like notes in a grand, horrific symphony. The warp whispered all of it to me, and I could hear it, the laughter of Chench. I remember the moment my knees gave way. The noise was too much, the knowledge unbearable. I fell into a trance, my consciousness dragged through layers of impossible color and geometry. The warp unfolded like an origami nightmare. Millions of faces, billions of wings, and endless laughter. A voice spoke, vast and cold. You wished to change fate. Now you shall change reality. When I awoke, Sarn was kneeling beside me, bleeding from his eyes. You disappeared for hours, my lord. The veil itself screamed. I stared at my hands. My skin had turned pale, almost translucent, glowing faintly from within as if fire burned beneath the surface. My right arm bore new markings, swirling blue sigils that pulsed in rhythm with my heartbeat. Naruto Uzumaki is no more, Sarn whispered reverently. You are Naruzan the Unbound, prophet of the 1,000 eyes. For the first time, I didn't correct him. In the following days, I began to experiment, methodically, obsessively. My shinobi discipline returned, but twisted by my new purpose. I built focus rituals instead of hand seals, inscribed wards instead of chakra lines. I learned how to channel warp energy through concentration rather than incantation, how to bind a daemon into a rune to fuel my spells. I created what the Imperium calls sorcery. My first spell was small, a flicker of blue flame that refused to die. The second shattered a boulder with a whisper. By the third, I could bend the very perception of time within a 10-meter radius, a crude echo of the Flying Thunder God technique, but powered by the will of chaos instead of chakra. The cultists worshipped me. Their faith fed me. And through them, I glimpsed more of Chinch's design. The Changer of Ways didn't just seek worship, he sought evolution. Change was truth, and stagnation was death. That belief resonated with something deep inside me. I had always been change, a boy who turned hatred into peace, a failure who became a leader. But in this galaxy, peace was a myth. Change here meant destruction. One night, as we camped amid the ruins of a long-dead hive city, I meditated beside the embers of a daemon fire. The warp pulsed around me like a heartbeat, and within that pulse, I felt a familiar presence, ancient, furious. The Nine Tails stirred. You've become what I was, a monster of power without restraint. Do you even remember why you fought? I clenched my fists. To protect what mattered, but there's nothing left to protect. Then you are lost. Its voice faded, leaving only silence, but I could still feel it trapped within me, now twisted, weakened. The warp had infected even the fox. I could use its hatred as fuel, blend it with my sorcery. Together, they produced something terrible and beautiful. Fire that devoured the soul, storms that shattered minds. My enemies learned this quickly. An Imperial patrol, remnants of a regiment from the Cadian 143rd, discovered our encampment. They came at dawn, disciplined, armored, faith burning in their eyes. Laser gun volleys lit the ruins. The cultists panicked. I did not. I raised my hand, tracing a sigil in the air. The world distorted. A ripple of pure warp energy surged outward. The soldiers screamed as their weapons fused to their arms, their armor melted into their flesh. I stepped through the haze, watching them collapse into grotesque statues of agony. One of them, a sergeant, fell to his knees, his vox bead hissing. "Witch, Emperor, save!" I silenced him with a thought. Competence, ruthlessness, clarity. I had never been more certain. When the battle ended, the cultists were chanting again, painting my new sigils on the walls with blood. I looked down at my reflection in a shard of cracked armor. My eyes now burned with shifting colors, blue to gold to crimson, a kaleidoscope of the warp. Something inside me whispered that this was only the beginning. That night, under a fractured moon, I gazed toward the stars. Imperial ships patrolled there, great engines of war and faith. Somewhere beyond them, I knew, the thousand suns still existed, true sorcerers, heirs to Magnus the Red. If I could find them, perhaps they could teach me to master the warp completely. Perhaps then I could control this power, or at least die trying. So I made my vow before the daemons and the void itself. I will not be a pawn, not of gods, not of fate, not of the warp. I will rewrite this galaxy in my own image. The shadows seemed to laugh, approvingly, and far across the stars, something ancient stirred, as if my declaration had been heard. The tension builds. Subscribe to witness more tales from the dark Millennium.
The Daemon Within. The journey to find the Thousand Suns began under a sky that refused to stay still. The stars bled and shifted, constellations melting into screaming faces. We traveled across wastelands of glass and ash aboard a stolen Imperial transport, its engines humming with warp corruption. I had named it the Fox's Wrath, a bitter joke to remind myself what I once was. The cultists, my disciples as they called themselves, were mutating faster now. Exposure to my power, or perhaps my mere presence, twisted them. Eyes bloomed across their skin, their mouths whispered my name in their sleep. They called me Prophet of Change, Lord of Flame, the Nine-Eyed Sun. They worshipped, but they also feared. They should have, because I was changing too. Every time I reached into the warp, it reached back deeper. The whispers no longer waited for my call. They spoke constantly, a chorus of schemes and promises. The Nine-Tails fought them, snarling, trying to anchor my mind. But even its rage was fading into a dull echo. Then came the night of the possession. We had stopped near the edge of a warp rift, a swirling wound of violet energy cutting through the planet's crust. I was meditating, tracing sigils into the dust, when the voices became one. You are no longer mortal. You are potential. Let us in and we shall make you eternal. A ripple of heat passed through me, and suddenly the world inverted. The warp wasn't outside anymore, it was inside. I was standing within my own mind, face to face with something monstrous. The fox. But not the one I remembered. Its fur burned with blue fire now, its eyes shifting colors like mine. The seal that once bound it was fractured, the kanji distorted into arcane runes. You've invited the storm. Now it wants your soul. Then let it try. The warp shuddered. A figure emerged behind the fox, towering, robed in living fire. Its form changed with every blink. Bird, serpent, man, god. Tichench, the changer of ways. Naruzan, you have done well. Your soul is a prism through which destiny refracts, but you are incomplete. Merge with the beast and become more. The fox roared, its tails thrashing. Don't listen! It's not offering power! It's devouring you! For a moment, I hesitated. I could feel both forces tearing at me, one chaos incarnate, the other fury and instinct. In that chaos, something inside me cracked. I remembered the faces of those I once loved, Kakashi, Sakura, Sasuke, ghosts of a world that would never know what became of me. I was tired of fighting fate, so I stopped resisting. The warp erupted in light. The fox screamed, its body dissolving into flame that flowed into me. I felt every tail fuse with my spine, every ounce of hatred and power becoming mine. My scream split the void, half human, half demon. When I opened my eyes again, I was lying on the deck of the Fox's Wrath. My disciples were sprawled around me, unconscious or dead. My reflection in the fractured hull plate made me pause. My body shimmered with marks of the warp, sigils burned into flesh, veins pulsing with blue fire. My hair floated as if underwater. Behind my pupils, 9 faint rings of light rotated slowly, each an echo of the beast I'd consumed. The fox was gone. I was both jailer and prisoner now. I rose to my feet. My voice, when I spoke, was layered with echoes. No more whispers, only my will. From that day forward, the warp obeyed. I could tear open reality with a gesture, summon entities that bent knee to me, fuse matter and thought into one. But every act drew attention. Across the immaterium, demons whispered my name in awe or envy. And somewhere far beyond the eye of terror, the 1,000 suns began to take notice. They sent emissaries, cloaked sorcerers wreathed in blue fire. They hailed me as kin, a soul reborn through Tichench's will. Their leader, Ahriman himself, reached out through the warp. You wield the fire of change with mastery, stranger. Come to the planet of the sorcerers, and I shall show you how to burn the galaxy clean. But I hesitated. I had seen what allegiance cost. The gods of chaos never shared power, they consumed it. Still, I craved knowledge, the one hunger even the warp could not erase. I prepared my ship for the journey. The fox's wrath howled as it pierced the veil, tearing through unreality toward the demon world of the 1,000 suns. My disciples, those who survived, sang hymns that distorted the air. During the voyage, I began to dream again, dreams of futures that weren't mine. Worlds where I stood beside Magnus, others where I fought against him, one where I ascended fully, becoming a warp god myself. But in every vision, one constant remained. Fire and ruin followed wherever I went. When the Fox's Wrath finally emerged from the warp, the planet of the sorcerers hung before us, a sphere of impossible geometry, floating within a storm of eternal magic. I stepped to the viewport, my eyes burning. I came here seeking mastery. Let's see what destiny demands in return. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the layers of power and corruption, a faint voice, once proud and defiant, whispered back, "You're already gone." Comment your theories below. What corruption truly rules our Chaos Sorcerer?
The burning path of damnation. The planet of the sorcerers wasn't a world. It was a labyrinth carved into eternity itself. Land masses drifted like shards of broken glass across oceans of living flame, and the sky shimmered with unending auroras of warp light. Time bled, rewound, and bled again. The 1,000 suns greeted me with the silence of ancient scholars. Their armor gleamed like sapphire glass, inscribed with runes that pulsed in rhythm with their hearts, or what remained of them. Rubric marines lined the causeways, empty shells of dust and armor, animated by sorcery. Their presence was a reminder. Power demands payment. I was led through halls that bent geometry itself. Doorways opened onto stars, steps led downward into the sky. Every whisper of the warp resonated in these walls, every ambition, every betrayal. And at the heart of it all stood Ahriman, first captain of the Thousand Suns. He was taller than any Astartes I'd seen, his voice calm yet infinite, like someone speaking through the memory of thunder. You are far from your origin, stranger, yet I feel the echoes of a god-beast within you. What do you seek? Mastery. I've seen what the warp can do. I want control, not servitude. Ahriman studied me for a long moment. You misunderstand, Naruzan. The warp cannot be controlled. It can only be directed. He led me through his libraries, vast archives built of bone and crystal, guarded by spectral scribes. He spoke of the great rubric, of Tzeentch's lies and gifts, of the endless quest to reclaim the flesh and souls of his fallen brothers. For weeks, or perhaps centuries, time had no meaning here. I studied how to weave warp patterns as easily as breathing. I tore apart reality and stitched it back together in new shapes. I communed with demons and silenced them with my will. For a while, I thought I had found balance. But balance is an illusion in the realm of chaos. The more I delved, the more the warp whispered, not as temptation, but as revelation. It showed me futures, worlds reshaped in my image, mortals wielding chakra and sorcery as one, an empire of change unbound by the Imperium or chaos alike, a new shinobi creed, adapt, ascend, rule. I began to share these visions. My power grew, and with it my following. Even some of the Thousand Suns listened when I spoke. Ahriman warned me, but I could see the doubt in his gaze. He feared that I might succeed where he had failed, to master the warp utterly. That was when the dreams turned into commands. Tzeentch whispered of a world, an imperial shrine planet devoted entirely to the Emperor. Billions of faithful souls prayed there each day, their psychic energy blazing like a beacon through the warp. The god of change wanted it snuffed out. The perfect test, the perfect ascension. So I led an army of sorcerers and demons through the veil. The fox's wrath burned with azure fire as we descended upon that holy world. The invasion was swift, brutal, and magnificent. Cathedrals collapsed into spirals of warped glass. Planetary defense cannons melted into rivers of molten metal. The sky bled blue lightning as warp storms raged unchecked. Imperial reinforcements arrived. Grey King Knights, the Emperor's demon hunters. Their silver armor glimmered like moonlight amid the chaos. They came chanting litanies of purity, wielding blades that burned with psychic fire. And for the first time in years, I felt fear. The battle that followed was beyond mortal comprehension. Warp fire clashed with sanctified flame. My disciples screamed prayers to Tzeentch as they burned. I carved through squads of Grey King Knights with storms of telekinetic blades, but their faith was a weapon I could not unmake. Their leader, a Justicar, faced me on the steps of the fallen Grand Cathedral. His voice thundered. You were mortal once. What have you become? I laughed, though my body trembled. Something the Emperor could never create. Freedom. He struck. His blade pierced my chest, and holy fire consumed me from within. The warp howled in pain and fury, but I didn't die. Instead, I ascended. The fire within me erupted outward, devouring the Justicar and half the city.
My mortal form dissolved, leaving only the storm. The warp and I became one. Flame, will, and thought fused together. The world burned for 7 days. When the storm finally died, nothing remained but ash and whispers. The Imperium declared it in exterminatus. The Thousand Suns called it a miracle. Tzinch laughed, his amusement echoing across the immaterium. But me? I was beyond them all. I drifted through the warp, a being of thought and purpose, shaping myself at will. My form changed with every emotion, fox, man, flame, shadow. I could feel the galaxy like a beating heart. The gods watched, wary, uncertain whether to call me ally or rival. Naruto Uzumaki was dead. Naruzan, the eternal flame, had taken his place. And somewhere, beyond even the warp, a tiny fragment of who I once was, a boy who believed in light, whispered into the void. Maybe one day, I'll find peace. But the warp never allows peace. It only offers change.
Across the galaxy, the name Naruzan the Flame-Eyed became legend, whispered by cultists, cursed by inquisitors, feared by daemons. Some said he ascended into the ranks of the Chaos Gods, carving a new throne from the ashes of his own defiance. Others claimed he wanders still, neither daemon nor man, searching for a way to undo the destiny he forged in fire. The warp remembers him differently each time. Hero, heretic, harbinger. But one truth endures. Even in damnation, he never stopped seeking to change the impossible. In the grim darkness of the far future, where faith and madness are the same coin, Naruto's tale is a reminder that no power is free, and no soul, no matter how bright, escapes the pull of the abyss forever. The Emperor protects. More stories await.